Hi, I'm Tom Mayanek, host of The Sport Market. Growing up in Montreal in the 60s and 70s, the Expos in baseball were a big deal. It's hard to believe it was 30 years ago this week that Rick Monday and the Los Angeles Dodgers stunned Steve Rogers and the Expos in the deciding game of the 1981 National League Championship Series. It's also hard to believe how times have changed since those 80s and 90s for Major League Baseball in terms of its place in the North American sports landscape. In Canada, of course, things are different because we're down to one American League team that is the only MLB franchise outside of the United States. The glory years of back-to-back World Series championships for the Toronto Blue Jays in 1992 and 1993 and that Montreal Expos contender of 1994 seem as faded as our memories of the player strike that killed the season and the World Series that year. Things are even more different south of the border, where baseball, once known as the American pastime, has watched as football has taken over as the king of U.S. sport and sport culture. It's a story a decade or so in the making, but it's one that's being reinforced again this week with storylines around the U.S. television ratings for the World Series between the Texas Rangers and the St. Louis Cardinals. This year's Fall Classic, baseball's biggest showcase, is on its way to record-low territory unless it can find its way to a sixth or seventh game. It got off to a slow start TV-wise in the U.S. with about 14 million viewers tuning in for Game 1. That's the lowest Game 1 since 2006, and it makes the series en route to matching or falling short of the previous record lows. The real key will be how Games 4 and 5 on Fox do on Sunday and Monday against primetime NFL television on NBC and ESPN, respectively. Never has it been more important for baseball to go long into a series as it does in this year's World Series. Baseball audiences for the World Series are about half of what they used to be in the 80s and about half of what the NFL polls regularly for its regular season broadcasts every Sunday, about one-third of what it does for the football playoffs, a quarter of the conference championships, and it's about 1/9 of what the biggest North American sports TV juggernaut of them all does, the Super Bowl. It's also well short of how the now locked-out NBA did in its 2011 finals between Dallas and Miami. With one-third of this year's World Series audience aged 50 or more, baseball indeed has some work to do to protect its place in the top 3 TV team sports in the U.S. And that's something hard to believe for someone who saw baseball's World Series as the biggest show on sports TV in the 70s and 80s.